And hopefully together we can raise enough money to help get Marc Emery home. Gentlemen, we are being joined on the program by another caller, someone who is very bright, very caring, very diligent when it comes to working in the marijuana movement. His name is Paul Stanford. I'm going to leave everybody on the line, but let's make certain that we don't talk over one another. Paul, thank you for taking time for Hemp.
Oh, well, this is Jodi Emery, and thanks so much, you guys, for this wonderful show support. Yeah.
I didn't think you'd be calling in the next hour. I knew that Marc was going to be talking to you. Oh, my gosh, what a pleasant surprise. Let me hush my mouth and call me Ethel. Hi, Jodi.
Hello, Jodi.
Hello, everybody. I thought I would give a call in. It's 9:52 out here in, well, I was going to say BC, but I'm in Washington State. So I am watching from my hotel room the live video on cannabisculture.com/moneybell and also on cannabisculture.com. Since midnight Friday, we've been streaming 24/7 nonstop from Cannabis Culture headquarters. There's a lot of our friends and associates are hanging out at Cannabis Culture headquarters, keeping people updated on the Money Bomb. And Marc and I were inspired to do this Money Bomb based on the work we did with the Ron Paul campaign back in 2007, when a lot of people were working hard for the Ron Paul for President campaign, ourselves included. And, you know, it was really great to see people come together in one day and raise a huge amount of money for someone that they believed in and supported. So with Marc, you know, he's had his struggles with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration since 2005 when they arrested him in Canada. And we haven't really, you know, asked for too much or done many fundraisers. We just, you know, accept people's support when they send it, and we do our best to get by with what we've got. But right now, Marc is in U.S. federal prison, and like all Canadian prisoners in the United States and American prisoners in Canada, he has a right to be transferred to his home country to serve his sentence. However, that requires a bunch of legal work and paperwork and filing documents. So on the Canadian end, we've already finished that part, and we're just waiting for the response, which will take some time, because the next part is getting the approval of the Department of Justice. So that means they're going to be consulting with the DEA and the Bureau of Prisons and the State Department to see if Marc Emery qualifies for transfer to Canada. Now, Marc does qualify, because the only reasons you can't be transferred are if you're part of organized crime or you're likely to reoffend. But, of course, Marc is neither of those things. So we hope that his application for transfer will be accepted. But in order to get that application made, we have to hire a U.S. transfer specialist lawyer. And there is a wonderful lawyer named Sylvia Royce. She does a lot of Canadian transfer applications. And, you know, really good quality things cost money, and she is going to cost, too, $8,500.
I'm sorry, that was my big mouth here in Tucson. I was just saying good night to somebody. I'll shut up now.
No worries. But yeah, so this Money Bomb fundraiser that we've been doing all day today is to raise the $8,500 US needed to secure this lawyer for the transfer application. And amazingly, and to our great joy and Marc's pleasure, we've raised $16,400 something, and that is phenomenal. And what really helps is that will pay for Marc's legal fees for the next, perhaps even the next year or two to come, because, you know, we don't need that much, but we certainly appreciate people contributing money.
That's wonderful.
Yes,
and we are asking people from all around the world to make that happen. Now, Jodi, how can they donate?
Well, there's a list of ways you can contribute at cannabisculture.com and freemark.ca. You can't miss the Money Bomb image. There's a streaming video live, so you can watch as people are talking about this and updating regularly how much money has come in. You can donate through PayPal by sending it to Jodi, Jodie, Jodi_Gies, which is Giesz. That's my name before I married Marc, at hotmail.com. So Jodi_Gies at hotmail.com is the way to send PayPal donations. You can send an email money transfer to Jodi Emery at gmail.com or Jodi Gies at hotmail.com. You can also call in to our office where our staff are staying up until midnight tonight and probably a bit later after that. And that number is 604-669-9069. You can use your credit card. And if you go on cannabisculture.com/store, there is a free Marc Emery section, and in that section are options to purchase or to make a donation. So you can choose from those options or mail in a check or money order, or if you're in Vancouver, BC, for the next couple hours, you can stop by the Cannabis Culture headquarters and BC Marijuana Party headquarters at 307 West Hastings Street. So the list of all the ways you can contribute are at cannabisculture.com and freemark.ca.
And I don't think people would mind if this money was also used to help Marc with his commissary. We understand, it's difficult to have nice things like fresh fruits and vegetables that he really does enjoy. And so there's a lot of things that this money is needed for. And I really would encourage, again, as I said at the opening of the show, Jodi, Marc's arms gave the whole world a hug, a big, warm hug. And now it's time for the world to hug you and Marc back.
Well, it's true. Marc gave so much to the movement, and a lot of people, perhaps now, 5 years after the original DEA arrest happened, perhaps they don't know the extent of what Marc Emery has done. But if you Google Marc Emery and you read the Wikipedia entry, and then you go on to watch videos and see all the documentaries and major media coverage from 60 Minutes to CNN, there's extensive coverage of Marc's story. Now, he started selling seeds in 1994 and said that every seed he sold and every dollar he made would be used to plant the seeds of freedom and overgrow the government. Because Marc has always been an excellent businessman. He's always known how to work with the dollar, but never for personal gain. Marc has never wanted a personal luxury or fortunes or savings or property or anything of the sort. He likes putting his money where his mouth is. And Marc, he's got a big mouth. So he's got big plans for all that money. It's absolutely true. And Marc, over the decade that he sold marijuana seeds, gave about $4 million to the movement. Now, there are many groups like, for example, Marijuana Policy Project. If you're in the marijuana movement, you've heard about MPP.org. They've done amazing work. They're the multi-million-dollar lobbyist group in Washington, D.C., but back in 1994, they were about to shut down. They didn't have any funding at all. And in 1998, when Rob Campia came up to see Marc and let him know, listen, we need help, Marc gave him $15,000, and that was enough to keep them going, and now they're a massive force in the drug policy reform scene. Marc gave $15,000 to Colorado activists to get the Colorado medical marijuana laws there. He gave $10,000 to Washington, D.C., so that they could get their medical marijuana laws, all the signatures required. He also gave, I think, $5,000 to Arizona for their medical marijuana laws. He spent $30,000 on a class action lawsuit against the federal government where he flew and put up in hotels over 30 different medical marijuana patients from around the United States to come and testify at this massive court hearing. He also paid for the Canadian Supreme Court challenge of cannabis, which took many years and ultimately was not won, but was a very big deal up in Canada. He financed the Global Marijuana March, all the posters that went around the world in all the different languages. That was him. He gave money to he founded and started the U.S. Marijuana Party and many state marijuana parties. He gave tons of money to compassion clubs. He paid for Rene Bourget, Steve Cubby got money from him. I believe Ed Rosenthal may have even had support from him too, and Todd McCormick, he knows that money was given to his friends and associates when they ran into trouble. So Marc has given extensively, in fact, so much money it would be impossible to list where it all went, because Marc never really needed receipts or anything. He just was there for people to come to and say, listen, I've got a conference, or I've got a rally, or I've got this court challenge, or I've been busted and I need help. And Marc would give them money. So his purpose at the end of every day was to have given away every dollar that he earned to the movement. And for a decade, he was extremely successful, so much so that the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, whose mandate is to stop legalization efforts, decided to take him out. And they had him indicted in the United States with conspiracy charges, conspiracy to manufacture marijuana, conspiracy to distribute marijuana, and conspiracy to launder the proceeds of crime. So, those three crimes he is technically guilty of, because he did know that people were manufacturing marijuana, and he did know that he was selling seeds, which are considered marijuana under our crazy laws. So, he wouldn't have been able to win at a trial. So when he was indicted of those charges in Washington State, he knew that he was going to have to work out some kind of deal. But it took 5 years of working out the details to make sure that his co-accused, Greg and Michelle, wouldn't have to go to prison. And finally, he was able to work out a 5-year plea deal for himself. So when the DEA arrested him, though, they put out a press release, which is easily found online. If you just Google Marc Emery DEA, you'll find the press release, or it's on freemark.ca, where they talk not about seeds, but all about his legalization activities and the money he gave away and the movement that he led. So they made it very clear the day he was arrested that it wasn't about marijuana seeds, but it was about his political activism. Marc ran as the president of the BC Marijuana Party, a full slate of candidates. He was a huge part in Canadian cannabis culture. Before Marc started, books and magazines about marijuana were illegal. In fact, you couldn't even buy High Times magazine in Canada. It was against the law. And when Marc discovered that the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, was illegal, and he didn't care for cannabis at all until he found out that this book about the hemp conspiracy was illegal in Canada, he said, I have to get that book. So he went down to the U.S. and got some from Detroit, because he lived in London, Ontario, and brought them all up to Canada and told the police, listen, I'm selling this illegal book, and you should come and arrest me and charge me so I can challenge this law. And he got a bunch of High Times magazines and did the exact same thing. He introduced High Times magazine to Canada. And, he didn't get taken to court because after many years of civil disobedience for other causes, for censorship and Sunday shopping laws and many libertarian and wonderful causes, the police decided they didn't want to let him win this one, so they didn't arrest him, and he got frustrated by that, but eventually the laws were struck down. So we have Marc Emery to thank for marijuana magazines and information in Canada. And before he started, when you wanted a bong or a pipe, he had to go to a little knick-knack shop down the street, not a pot shop, not a head shop. There were no such thing in Canada. But he started Hemp BC and sold marijuana seeds and sold bongs that were used for smoking marijuana, not for legal herb use or tobacco use, but marijuana bongs. And he used civil disobedience and his business and the money generated to fund the cannabis culture movement, and started the magazine and started Pot TV later on. So without Marc, he actually wholesaled to all the hemp stores across Canada. He started the hemp store scene in Canada. So many Canadians have a lot to thank Marc for, but so do Americans. His great heroes are Americans. He loves Thomas Jefferson, Martin Luther King Jr. He's very inspired by a lot of the great liberty-loving freedom fighters of America, who would probably be just as disappointed in America today as many of us are, and I'm sure your audience is. So Marc, he not only gave all that money away, but he was a huge inspiration to so many people. And the fact that no seed sellers would send seeds into the United States for fear of arrest, and Marc said, screw that, I'm going to help them overgrow their government. And he sold millions of seeds to Americans. So when you look to California, where they're voting on legalizing marijuana for all adults on November 2nd, all that cannabis being grown in California right now, a huge part of it was started from the seeds that Marc Emery sent there, because his slogan was to plant the seeds of freedom and overgrow the government. And now he's about to be sent to serve his 5-year prison sentence in California, where on November 2nd, it's very likely that marijuana will be legalized. So there's a great irony in that, but it's also a fitting end to an amazing story of an amazing activist And I shouldn't say end, really. It's just the end of this chapter, because there's plenty more to come from Marc Emery in the future, that's for sure.